Aaron stood motionless, the warmth from his mug of tea long forgotten, his knuckles white around the ceramic. His gaze wasn't fixed on Robert, but on a point somewhere beyond him, as if he were replaying every word, every pained expression, every desperate plea from the last hour through a new, tainted filter. The raw, visceral story of Robert's survival, the beatings, the fear, the unlikely savior in Kev, the intervention of his dying grandmother had moved him. It had cracked open the shell of resentment he had carefully constructed over months of silence. He had been on the precipice of understanding, of forgiveness. And now, this. A brain tumor, Aaron said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that barely disturbed the air. It wasn't a question. It was an indictment. You stood there, you poured your heart out, you told me about Jez, about Faith. And you slipped that in. A lie about my sister. Your sister. Why, Robert? Robert flinched, the color draining from his face. He had been so close. He had felt the walls between them crumbling, had seen the flicker of the old Aaron, the man who would have wrapped him in his arms and told him it was all over. Now, that man was gone, replaced by a sentinel of mistrust, his eyes as hard and cold as the Yorkshire stone of the cottage walls. Aaron, you don't understand, Robert began, his voice raspy with desperation. He took a step forward, his hands half raised in a placating gesture. He's not normal. Kev. He's not just some bloke I shared a cell with. He's an obsession waiting for a host. He saved my life, yes, but it came at a price. I became his property. His reason for everything. When I told him about the appeal, about getting out, he completely lost it. The look in his eyes. It was the same look he had when he described what he did to the guy who messed with his mate. It was pure, terrifying rage. I had to give him a reason, a noble reason, that he could accept. Something that wasn't about you. Something that wasn't about me, Aaron repeated, the words dripping with a bitter irony that stung more than any shout. He finally looked at Robert, and the depth of the betrayal in his eyes was a physical blow. That's what this is always about, isn't it? Managing me. Protecting me. Lying to me for my own good. You did it when you were inside, keeping it a secret that you were just a few miles away. You did it with Kev. You're doing it now. You tell me 99 truths so I'll swallow the one, soul-destroying lie you need me to. He slammed the mug down on the coffee table, the crack of ceramic echoing the fracture between them. Did Jez even exist, Robert? Or was that just another story? Was the stabbing a setup? Was Faith's visit real or just a convenient plot point you invented to justify coming back? How do I know? How do I ever know what's real with you? The accusation hung in the air, venomous and potent. For Robert, it was a stake through the heart. The story of his time in prison was his testimony, the most vulnerable, raw truth he had ever offered. To have it all questioned, all of it tainted by one desperate, strategic lie, was to have his entire experience invalidated. Jez was real, Robert whispered, his voice cracking with a pain so profound it was almost inaudible. The beating was real. I still wake up some nights tasting the blood. Faith. Aaron, don't you dare question what your gran did for us. She came to me, frail and dying, and she used her last ounces of strength to give me a reason to fight. She did it for you. For us. Don't let this lie poison that. Don't let it poison everything. It's already poison, Aaron retorted, turning his back, unable to look at the genuine agony on Robert's face because he feared it might be just another performance. I need to get out of here. I need to breathe air that isn't thick with your excuses. He moved towards the door, his movements stiff, robotic. Robert's voice, sharp with panic, stopped him in his tracks. Where are you going? Aaron's hand was on the doorknob. He paused, his back still to Robert. I don't know, he said, his voice hollow. But I know I can't be here. Not right now. I need to think. And what about him? What about Kev? Robert pressed, a new, urgent fear lacing his tone. He thinks he's dying, Aaron. He thinks I'm only back here for a little while, to look after my sick sister before I come back to him. He's not going to just wait by the phone forever. He's unstable. Aaron turned around slowly, a grim, humorless smile twisting his lips. Well, that sounds like your problem, doesn't it? You built the web, Robert. You can figure out how to untangle yourself from the psycho spider you invited into it. Just do me a favor. Leave my sister out of it. The door opened and closed with a soft, final click. Robert was left alone in the suffocating silence, the ghosts of his past and the ruins of his future swirling around him like a malevolent storm. He had won his freedom, but in the space of a single, catastrophic conversation, he realized he might have just lost everything that ever made that freedom worth fighting for. Miles away, in a dreary, soulless bedsit that smelled of damp and regret, Kev was not waiting patiently. The persona of the terminally ill, heartbroken lover was a costume he wore, and it was beginning to itch. He sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress, staring at his mobile phone, a cheap, disposable burner. He'd given Robert 2 days of radio silence. That was more than generous. It was time for a gentle reminder, a tug on the puppet strings. His thumb hovered over Robert's contact, but he didn't call. That was too direct, too needy. Kev's methods were more insidious. He scrolled through his contacts, a motley collection of numbers with no names, only codes. He stopped at one he knew as Doncaster Rat. He typed a quick, simple message: Emmerdale. Mill Cottage. Find out who lives there with him. Kev was not a fool. He knew Robert's story about Victoria's brain tumor was almost certainly a lie. He'd seen the flicker of panic in Robert's eyes when he'd first confronted him about the appeal. Robert was a terrible liar when he was scared, and Kev knew how to make him scared. The story was too convenient, too melodramatic. But it served a purpose. It gave Kev leverage. It was an admission that Robert needed an excuse to leave him, which, in Kev's twisted mind, only reaffirmed his own importance. Robert couldn't just leave, he had to invent a family tragedy. The lie about his own terminal illness was a stroke of genius, he thought. It was the perfect emotional blackmail. It transformed him from a possessive ex-convict into a tragic figure deserving of pity and loyalty. It was the chain that would keep Robert bound to him, a debt of guilt and sympathy that could never truly be repaid. He had saved Robert's life in prison, and now, Robert was expected to shepherd him gently towards his death. It was poetic. A reply buzzed on his phone a few minutes later. Lives with the ex. Aaron Dingle. A slow, cold smile spread across Kev's face. Aaron. The ex from the wedding photo, the one Robert claimed he broke up with so as not to waste his life. The very man Faith Dingle had apparently wanted Robert to reunite with. Kev had done his homework. He knew about Faith's death, had read the local news archives. He knew she was Aaron's gran. Everything was connected. This wasn't just about Robert leaving him. This was about Robert leaving him for someone else. For the past he claimed to have left behind. This was a betrayal of the highest order. The bond they had forged in the crucible of prison, the promises whispered in the dark on thin, plastic mattresses, the shared future they had planned, all of it was being threatened by this Aaron. He stood up and walked over to the grimy window, looking down at the street below. The pity party was over. The game had changed. He wasn't just a dying man seeking comfort anymore. He was a king whose throne had been usurped. And he would do whatever it took to reclaim his kingdom. Robert had made a promise. "Of course I will," he'd said, when Kev had proposed, bleeding on the cold prison floor. A promise was a promise. And Kev always collected on his debts. He picked up the phone again, this time dialing Robert's number. He let it ring twice, then hung up. A little nudge. A reminder that he was there, waiting, thinking of him. He would let the silence and the guilt do the work for now. But his patience was finite. Soon, he would have to pay a visit to the quaint little village of Emmerdale. He was eager to meet the family. Especially the one with the miraculous, non-existent brain tumor. Aaron drove without a destination, the engine's roar a poor substitute for the screaming in his own head. He ended up parked by the woods, the familiar landscape offering no comfort. He slammed his fists against the steering wheel, a wave of helpless fury washing over him. He had allowed himself to hope. That was his mistake. With Robert, hope was the most dangerous drug of all. He needed to talk to someone, but who? Chaz would go nuclear, immediately wanting to confront Robert. Patty would offer gentle, well-meaning advice that wouldn't touch the sides of the rage and confusion he was feeling. Liv was too young, he couldn't burden her with this, not now, when things were finally getting back on track for her. His phone buzzed. It was Victoria. His heart plummeted. The lie. It was sitting there, a toxic lump in his throat. "Hey, you okay? Saw you tear out of the village like your car was on fire. Everything all right with you and Robert?" He stared at the message, his thumb trembling over the screen. What could he say? "Yeah, fine, except the man I love just confessed he told his psychotic, obsessive ex-cellmate that you're dying of a brain tumor to escape him." He typed back a vague reply. "Just needed some air." Long conversation. Her reply was instant. "Good long or bad long? Is he staying? I'm dying to know. Don't leave me in suspense." The casual use of the word dying sent a jolt of ice through his veins. It wasn't fair. Victoria, who had been through hell and back, who had faced down her own rapist, raised her child alone, and fought for her family time and time again to have her strength, her very life, used as a bargaining chip in Robert's sick game was unforgivable. He made a decision. He couldn't protect Robert anymore. Not at Victoria's expense. He had to tell her. She deserved to know the kind of danger her own brother might be bringing to their doorstep. He found her at the Woolpack, helping Chaz behind the bar. The pub was quiet for a weekday afternoon. He pulled her aside, his face grim. "Vic, we need to talk. In private." His tone was enough to wipe the smile from her face. She followed him into the back room, her expression etched with concern. "Aaron, you're scaring me. What is it? What did he say?" Aaron took a deep breath. He told me everything. About prison. Why he didn't get in touch. And about the man he was with inside. His name is Kev. Okay. Victoria prompted, her brow furrowed. And? Is this Kev a problem? He's a massive problem, Aaron said, his voice low and intense. Robert says he's dangerous, manipulative. He saved Robert from some other inmates, and then basically owned him. Robert got engaged to him, Vic. Just to survive. Victoria's eyes widened in shock. Engaged? Oh my God, that poor guy. What he must have gone through. Yeah, Aaron said, the word sharp. He went through a lot. And he did a lot, too. To get away from this Kev, when his appeal finally came through. He told him a lie. An excuse for why he had to leave. He paused, struggling to force the words out. Victoria looked at him, her heart pounding with a sudden, inexplicable dread. What lie, Aaron? What did he tell him? Aaron finally met her eyes, and his own were filled with a mixture of anger and apology. He told Kev that you were sick. That you had a brain tumor, and you were dying. He said he was getting out on compassionate release to be with you in your final months. The world seemed to fall away from beneath Victoria's feet. For a moment, she just stared, her mind refusing to process the words. A brain tumor. Her. Dying. The sheer, calculated cruelty of it stole her breath. It wasn't just a lie, it was a violation. He had taken her life, her health, and twisted it into a prop for his drama. Her shock quickly curdled into a white-hot rage. It was a fury so pure and intense it made her tremble. He what? She breathed, the words barely a whisper. Then, her voice rose, filled with disbelief and venom. He told the monster that I was dying? Is he insane? What if this man decides to come here, Aaron? What if he shows up at my door with a bunch of flowers and a sympathy card? What if he tries to talk to Harry? Has Robert lost his mind completely? I think he's just scared, Vic, Aaron tried, his own anger momentarily eclipsed by the storm he had unleashed. Scared? Victoria laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. We're all scared. I was scared when Lee was stalking me. I was scared giving birth to his son. But I never, ever would have used someone else's life, someone I love, as a shield. This is beyond anything he has ever done before. This isn't just a lie to cover his tracks. He put a target on my back. On my family's back. She pushed past him, her eyes blazing. Where is he? I'm going to kill him. I swear to God, Aaron, I am going to kill him myself. She stormed out of the back room and through the pub, ignoring Chaz's concerned calls. Aaron followed, his heart hammering in his chest. He had known she would be angry, but he hadn't anticipated this. This was a primal fury, the protective rage of a mother and a sister whose deepest sanctities had been violated. The web Robert had woven was not untangling. It was tightening, and now it was dragging them all down with him. Robert was still sitting in the crushing silence of Mill Cottage when the front door flew open with such force that it slammed against the wall. Victoria stood in the doorway, her face a mask of thunderous rage, her chest heaving. Aaron stood a few paces behind her, looking grim and resigned. You absolute bastard, Victoria hissed, advancing on him. You selfish, manipulative, toxic bastard. A brain tumor? A brain tumor? Of all the sick, twisted things you have ever done, Robert, this is the lowest. Robert scrambled to his feet, his hands raised as if to ward off physical blows. Vic, please, let me explain. I was desperate. You don't know what he's capable of. I don't care what he's capable of. She shrieked, poking him hard in the chest with her finger. I care what you are capable of. You took my life, my health, and you served it up on a platter to your psycho boyfriend as an excuse. What were you thinking? That he'd just send a condolence card and forget all about you? People like that don't just go away, Robert. They latch on. They get curious. What happens when he shows up here? The very fear Robert had been nursing in the pit of his stomach was now being screamed at him, and it was 100 times more terrifying out loud. He won't, Robert said, his voice lacking any conviction. He thinks I'm coming back to him. And when you don't? Victoria shot back. When months go by and I'm not dead, and you're still here, shacked up with Aaron. What's the plan then, Robert? Another lie? Are you going to tell him I had a miracle cure? Or maybe you'll just kill me off for real in your little soap opera to give him some closure? Every word was a perfectly aimed dagger. Robert staggered back, speechless. He had no plan. His only plan had been to get out, to get back to Aaron, to fix things. He had dealt with the immediate threat of Kev with a short-term, desperate solution, never thinking through the catastrophic long-term consequences. I'm sorry, he whispered, the words utterly inadequate. Vic, I am so sorry. I never wanted to put you in danger. But you did, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. You did. And now we all have to live with it. You need to fix this, Robert. You need to cut him out of your life, for good. And you need to do it now. Before he decides to come and pay his respects to your dying sister." As if summoned by the very words, a car engine growled to a stop outside. It wasn't a familiar village car, it had the low, throaty rumble of something powerful and out of place. A car door slammed shut. A chilling silence fell over the room. The three of them froze, their angry, panicked breaths caught in their throats. They looked at each other, a shared, primal fear dawning in their eyes. Then came the knock. 3 soft, polite raps on the door of Mill Cottage. It wasn't loud, aggressive banging. It was a calm, confident, almost gentle sound. And that was infinitely more terrifying. It was the knock of someone who believed they had every right to be there. Someone who had come to visit a loved one. Aaron moved instinctively, placing himself between Victoria and the door. Robert was pale as a ghost, his eyes wide with a terror that confirmed their worst fears. "Don't answer it," Victoria breathed, her rage forgotten, replaced by sheer panic. "He knows I'm here," Robert whispered, his voice trembling. "He knows. He'll have seen the car. He won't go away." The knock came again, a little more insistent this time. It was followed by a voice, muffled by the thick wood of the door, but clear enough to make the blood run cold in Robert's veins. "Robbie? You in there, mate? It's me. I was just in the area, thought I'd pop by. Brought you some of those brownies you like. The vegan ones." It was him. Kev. He was here. Standing on their doorstep, feigning normality, playing the part of the concerned fiancé. The spider had arrived at the heart of the web. And they were all, now, trapped in it with him. The lie had come home to roost, and it had brought a monster with it. The real story was just beginning. The voice from behind the door, so jarringly casual, so laden with false bonhomie, acted like a paralytic agent. The air in Mill Cottage solidified, trapping the three of them in a tableau of pure terror. Kev. Not in a hypothetical future, not as a threat on the other end of the phone line, but here. Now. Holding a bag of vegan brownies. The sheer, grotesque banality of it was the most terrifying part of all. Robert looked as though he might physically collapse. The blood had drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy, translucent sheen of sweat. He was a ghost haunted by a demon he himself had summoned. Victoria, whose rage had been a blazing inferno just moments before, was now a pillar of ice, her fury extinguished by a more primal, immediate fear. It was Aaron who moved first. The paralysis broke, replaced by a cold, protective instinct that was as much a part of him as his own heartbeat. His jaw was set like granite, his eyes narrowed into slits of controlled fury. He was no longer the wounded lover, he was the guardian of the gate. "Stay behind me," he murmured, his voice a low command directed at both Robert and Victoria. He took 2 deliberate strides towards the door, his body a solid, unmoving shield. "Aaron, don't," Robert choked out, a hand flying to his mouth. You don't know what he's like. And he doesn't know what I'm like," Aaron shot back over his shoulder, his hand closing around the cold brass of the doorknob. "We can't just stand here while he knocks. He knows you're here. This has to be faced." He took one last, steadying breath and pulled the door inward. The man on the doorstep was deceptively normal. He wasn't the hulking, scarred monster of their imagination. He was of average height, with a wiry strength hidden beneath a cheap jacket. He had short, neat hair and a face that could have been handsome if not for the unnerving stillness in his dark eyes, a predatory calm that his wide, friendly smile couldn't quite conceal. In his hand, he held a paper bag from which the faint, sweet smell of chocolate emanated. "Robbie." Kev's smile widened as he tried to peer past Aaron. His gaze was sharp, analytical, taking in the scene in a fraction of a second. "There you are. Not answering your phone. Had me worried, mate." His eyes landed on Aaron, and they lingered, a flicker of something cold and appraising in their depths. "Ah. You must be Aaron. The ex. Robbie told me all about you." He extended a hand, the gesture a clear power play. Aaron ignored it. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice flat and unwelcoming. Kev's smile didn't falter, but his eyes hardened almost imperceptibly. He slowly retracted his hand. "Just came to see how my fiancé is settling in. And to offer my condolences, of course. For his sister. It's a terrible business. I wanted to pay my respects." He craned his neck again. "Is she around? Victoria, is it? I wouldn't want to intrude if she's not feeling up to visitors." The question hung in the air, a baited hook. Behind Aaron, Robert was frozen, his mind a screaming void. This was it. The moment the lie would either collapse, bringing the whole world down with it, or the moment they would have to build it higher, brick by horrifying brick. Robert's eyes darted towards Victoria, a silent, desperate plea. "Please." Victoria felt the plea like a physical touch. Every cell in her body screamed in protest. To perform for this man, to debase herself and her own vitality by playing the part of a dying woman for the benefit of her brother's tormentor, was the most repugnant thing she could imagine. But then she looked at Robert's ashen face, at the sheer, unadulterated terror in his eyes. And she saw Aaron, standing firm but tense, ready for a fight he shouldn't have to have. She understood in that gut-wrenching moment that her anger, however justified, was a luxury they could not afford right now. The monster was inside the walls. They had to get him out. With a resolve that felt like swallowing powdered glass, she made her choice. She took a small, unsteady step forward into Kev's line of sight. She brought a trembling hand up to her temple, as if struck by a sudden wave of dizziness. Her vibrant, fiery energy was gone, replaced by a fragile, weary grace. "Hello," she said, her voice a soft, breathy whisper. She gave a weak, apologetic smile. "Sorry. The light. It's a bit much for me today." Robert's breath hitched in his throat, a sound of both profound relief and gut-twisting shame. She was doing it. She was playing along. Kev's entire demeanor shifted. The cold, appraising look vanished, replaced by an oozing, theatrical sympathy. He stepped past Aaron, invading the cottage, his presence immediately sucking the air out of the room. "Victoria," he said, his voice dripping with faux compassion. "It's an honor to finally meet you. Robbie's told me so much. You're so incredibly brave." He placed the paper bag on the side table. "I'm Kev. Robert and we got very close inside." He moved towards her, and Victoria fought the urge to recoil. "He's told me," she whispered, forcing herself to meet his gaze. His eyes were like polished stones, giving nothing away, but taking everything in. She felt like an insect under a microscope. "You look pale," Kev observed, his head tilted. "But you're holding up well." Robert made it sound like you were at death's door. "Some days are better than others," Robert cut in, finding his voice at last. It was shaky, but he forced it into a steady rhythm. "Today's a good day. Relatively." "That's wonderful news," Kev beamed, but his smile was a predatory slash. He looked from Robert to Victoria and back again. "It must be so hard on you all. Especially you, Robbie. Trying to care for her, dealing with all the emotion of it all. Must be exhausting." He took another step closer to Victoria, his eyes scanning her face with an unnerving intensity. "You know, I've got some experience with this. My mum, it wasn't a brain tumor, but it wasn't pretty. I learned a thing or two about palliative care. Cooking, cleaning, just being there, so the family can have a moment's peace." He paused, letting his words sink in, a benevolent offer laced with pure poison. "In fact," he continued, his gaze locking onto Robert's, "that's partly why I came. I've got nothing tying me down. My time is my own. I could stay. Just for a little while. Get a room at the BB. I could help. Cook some meals, run some errands. Take some of the pressure off you,